Welcome to Top to Bottom Male Romance Podcast, where we celebrate all things male romance. I am Jessica.
And I'm Markie.
And this is our January bottom episode.
Yes. So just like with every episode, I do need to let you know we do have reader groups. We have one on Facebook and one on Goodreads. You can jump in at any time and tell us about any upcoming series that you're excited about, TV shows, comic books, books you'd recommend, or the bottom pick that we're reading for the month. You can jump in at any time and talk to us about it there. We also have a Patreon. Our patrons get inside information about upcoming interviews that we have going on and get a chance to submit questions to said interview person. So if you haven't had a chance to check it out, make sure you do so.
And if you haven't done so yet, make sure you rate us on whatever it is you listen to us on. It helps other people find us too.
Woo! So this month we had the pleasure of reading Honey from the Lion from Jackie North. And as a fun little surprise, but I'm sure you saw it coming, we were able to snag an interview with Madame North, and it was very fantastic. Poor Jess was very sick during that time, so it was just me and Jackie hanging out. And I had a great time talking to her. She's lovely, sweet. I mean, you've met her in person, Jess. She's exactly how you remember from GRL. She's just one of those, just lovely, fun people to talk to. And she's really, really passionate about her book and her research and everything. And it was really, really fun.
Yeah, I was really impressed with her. I mean, I always kind of thought she was awesome, from behind the scenes, and then meeting her at GRL, she just blew me away with her. She's just so genuine and really wants to help support everybody around her. And now that I've read her book, she's fantastic at that. Mm-hmm. And I'm super, super glad we were able to have her on.
Yeah, absolutely. And the book was a lot of fun too. Before we deep dive into it, we're going to spoil the shit out of this because it's just unavoidable.
Yeah, I know a lot of times we say spoilers and there's not really critical spoilers. I can already guarantee you right now that the spoileriest of spoilers are going to spoil.
Yeah, since the nature of the book is it's a time travel romance, there's knowing how certain things will play out will kind of ruin some of the best parts. So if you don't want things spoiled, you gotta skip this whole episode because me and Jackie deep dive into some spoiler shit too. So sorry. I mean, approach with caution. The interview's really fun to listen to her talk about her craft and stuff, but we're probably gonna spoil some shit. So just so you know.
Yeah, so if you haven't read the book, it's a really fun read. I devoured it very, very quickly. So stop the podcast, go read it real quick, and come back.
Yes, I ate it all in one sitting as well, and it's a good 300 and something pages. So it's not like it's a little flimsy whatever book. It's got some really good depth to it. I really enjoyed it, but I just couldn't put it down. I got hooked pretty fast because Lori, falls backwards in time pretty quick. And so as soon as that happened, I was just 100% invested. I wanted to see what happened. I want to understand who John was because he's a grumpy Gus and I loved it. So yeah, it was super fun.
Yeah. So let's start with the beginning. I was instantly really, really thrilled when she's like, oh, we're going to sit the men in the book, mm-hmm. They're at a dude ranch. So he's trying to get away from his, high strung corporate life and just kind of mellow and be for a little bit. And so he goes to this dude ranch in the middle of nowhere. And at the beginning, they're gonna sit around the fire and tell ghost stories, and I'm like, hell yeah, ghost stories. Right. So they tell the story of old Joe and his little thought, and you kind of tug at it there. You kind of know where it's gonna go. Also, when he's sitting in the office, he's like, oh, there's pictures, but I can't really see them. And anyway, and then from there, he goes back, and man, so you just imagine yourself as your everyday person. You're glued to your phone. You have 10 different kinds of media that are bombarding you at all times. Everything's super easy because if you don't have food, you can call somebody, they bring it to your door. Survival's not really as hard as it was at one point. Then all of a sudden you have none of that. None of that, no electricity, no typical running water. There's freaking snow and shit. I'm from Texas, so that's a big deal.
The fact that he woke up in a blizzard, I was like, oh, well, I would have just immediately died. This would have been the shortest book ever because I would have woken up in snow and been like, and there she died. Fuck that. I can't handle that. But can we appreciate the fact that and we touch on this in the interview, so I won't super talk a ton about it, but Jackie does her research like crazy. So when they go back to 1891, it's how it was in 1891 at a random fucking cabin in the middle of nowhere. John has to, hunt his own food and keep up the home and make everything work correctly. And it's so fish out of water that I love it. There's just no earthly, I would have nowhere mind-wise, I can't even talk. Hold on. I would have no earthly idea how to keep myself alive in that situation. Like, I'd never even hunted anything before. Like, I'd be so incredibly fucked.
You brought up the research she did. You know that I am the stickler for massively out of place historical elements in
Yes.
historical books. And like really she did such a freaking great job that, I know that she said chatting with her previously that she had mentioned that, there might be a few things that aren't perfectly on point as far as the year is concerned, but there was so much that was so great that, man, credit where it's due, man. That was awesome. I always get hung up on research when I'm doing little writing projects and stuff, and man, she nailed it.
Yeah, she did great. It was really fun. And the characters are fantastic too. Like, Laurie is very much a modern dude who does not put up with bullshit. So, the first, when doesn't realize he's time traveled yet, and he's still just like, wow, this guy's fucking weird. Why are you guys talking like this? Or like when John goes into town with him, and one of the ladies there is a Native American, but everyone's calling her an Indian. And he was like, dude, what are you doing? And they're just like, he had no concept. Like, it was just so funny. So, I love the fact that you've got this brash, like 2019 dude getting transported back where like the normal life expectancy was like, I don't know, 40s if you're lucky. Like it's just a totally different world, and I really loved it. I love the fact that John, when you first meet him, he's this scary bear of a man. Like, he's just as no nonsense as Laurie, but in a totally different way. And it seems like he like eats nails for lunch. Like, this dude's just like grizzled as hell. And then as the story progresses, you realize I think one of the lines in the book that I really liked is Laurie realizes he has to be very, very gentle with this hardened man, because he had to be so careful with John because of all the shit he's gone through and how nervous he was, like when their relationship started like ramping up, and like he was so very much a man's man, but he really needed a gentle touch. Like, I'm such a sucker for that.
Yep. It was really good. But yeah, there's just a point in the book where, your heart just starts to like wrap around both of them, and you just want to keep them both safe and away from everything bad is going to happen. I get to that point in a lot of romances before that break point happens, which happens in, almost every single, if not every single romance. But sometimes it hits harder than others. And like, I really didn't want that bubble of happy to break. And it's one of those, I was just like, I could stop now and they'll be happy forever.
Oh, yeah. I was so terrified that some bad stuff was happening. And she did so good with the story with old Joe and the little fox. And typical me, I'm always like 3 steps behind crap like that. I didn't know how that was going to weave into the story. Like, that Laurie is the fox. Like, that was just, it wasn't until they went into town and the girl was like, oh, your hair's red like a fox. I was like, like, I'm such an ass. But,
well, the lady in the lodge that was like doing his paperwork, she mentioned his red hair and he got defensive about it.
Yeah, and I like reflecting back on it, I was like, yeah, she kind of spoon feeds you this pretty obviously, and it's still just like right over my head. Like, I didn't catch it until
just along for the ride.
I didn't catch it until like way afterwards. Is one of those like you realize, oh, and then you look around and like everybody else has already gotten it, and I'm like, cool. So it's just, yeah. But because of that story being in place, like, I subconsciously did not realize I'd been carrying that the whole time. And then when everything was really starting to go well, that's when my brain was like, remember about the fox. And I was like, it blindsided me.
Yeah. My heart was like ripping itself apart. Like, man, he's going to die. It's going to be because he goes back in the future and we don't know what the hell is going to happen with that. How is that going to work out? And then they have she has the friends, Maxton and Zach, back home that, when he does come back, he's, it's this heartfelt, like they're really worried about him and you want everything to be okay with that. But then like, man, John's going to die.
Right. And we talked about it in the interview too, but like, I appreciate the shit out of the fact that Laurie, I appreciated the fact that the ending wasn't John came to him, that Laurie basically was like, fuck it. I mean, everybody will get over it. I got to go back to John. Like, he knows he's going to leave his friends in the lurch and they're going to always wonder what happened to him, but he can't let John die, So it's really bittersweet. And I, like, at first was like, oh, that's yikes, because I'm like, that's kind of almost a sad ending, but not really. But it's not perfectly tied up in a bow. And Jackie goes a little bit into why she made that decision in the interview, like as far as like her future plans for the series and stuff. But, I didn't know that when I read it. So I was just like, oh God, like that's such a cool, bold move. At least in my opinion, I liked it.
I was actually really excited to see because I went and was double checking, doing my fact checking like you do, and was looking to see how many books were in the series so far. And I saw that the next 2 books are Zach and Maxton. And I'm so excited about that because I really want to see how they coped with that whole situation and like, does it get addressed? And then how does their story play in? I don't know. I'm really excited to keep going with this series, which is really funny because they're all kind of Westerns. And
it's so not your thing.
Despite the fact that despite the fact that my best friend writes a series of Westerns, I really don't care about Westerns. I just don't care. I don't dislike them, but it's not something I gravitate towards. I would have never picked it up on my own. And I'm really, really glad I did. Even the Western aspects of it were really cool. Like the day-to-day chores. Like as I was reading it, I was fascinated with it. And I was like, I should be bored right now, but I'm totally not. This is awesome.
Well, and I think one is because Jackie writes them really well and weaves those chores into their relationship building, and 2, we're nerds and like learning about what people did in the 1890s is actually fucking interesting to us. So it's probably a good portion of both of those things, but she does just a fantastic job with, like, I know now what was the thing that they always ate, the corned mash or something? Corn mash or something? Yeah, corn mush. And I was like,
cornmeal mush.
Good. It was really interesting. I loved it.
It's like cornbread, right? But it's like instead of battering it up and putting it in a pan to like become cornbread, it's that same cornbread mix, right? But like fried.
It just the name makes it sound like super appetizing.
Well, yeah, this is why we have different names for things nowadays.
You want some corn mush? No, I don't. No, thank you for that.
Oh, well, then you will starve in your death in the snow.
Again, why I wouldn't survive. 1, I'm not as charming as Lori, and I don't think John would put up with me at all. So,
well, I don't think you give yourself enough credit for how charming you are, but 2, you're probably right.
We wouldn't get along. Also, I'm not his type.
Yeah.
But yeah, super fun. Really liked it. I will absolutely be following the series. And, she talks in the interview about some other cool series ideas that are branching off of this that I'm dedicated to, and they haven't even happened yet. So I guess if this is a good place to segue, then we can go ahead and introduce our segment, or I guess me talking to Jackie for 30 minutes.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's go to the interview.
Joining us today is the author of the bottom pick for the month of January, Honey from the Lion, written by the wonderful, fabulous Jackie North. Jackie North has been writing stories since grade school and has spent years absorbing mainstream romance that she found at her local grocery store. Her dream was to someday leave her corporate job behind and travel the world. She creates characters who are a bit flawed and broken, who find themselves on the edge of society, and maybe a few who are a little bit lost, but who all deserve a happily ever after. And she makes sure that they get it. She likes long walks on the beach, the smell of lavender and rainstorms, and enjoys sleeping in on snowy mornings. Thank you for joining us, Jackie.
Hey, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Just as a quick aside, I'm sure we'll bring this up in this snippet before the interview, but Jess is sick, so it's just going to be me and Jackie hanging out for this interview. So get well soon, Jess, future past Jess, whatever this is going.
Chicken soup.
Yes. All right. So we start all of our interviews the same. So we have to ask, what got you into romance?
Well, many, many years ago, I had gone to a Star Trek convention where Leonard Nimoy was talking. It was the last day. It was standing room only, pretty much. And someone in the audience asked him, "Hey, Leonard, Mr. Nimoy, have you heard of / romance? Have you heard of KS, which is Kirk and Spock in love, and those love stories about those 2 characters?" And the whole audience groaned, and I had no idea what they were talking about. And Leonard Nimoy, who's such a gentleman, he says, "Yes, I've heard of it, and no, I haven't read any, but I do believe that Bill Shatner has a stack beneath his bed," and everybody laughs. But I'm dying to know what made 2,000 people groan like that. So I went poking around and found in the dealer's room somebody who was selling / under the table. Everything was under the table back in those days. We're talking like 1992 or something. Mm-hmm. And I was like $20, for a zine. It was called Vagabonds by Della Van Ice. I inhaled it because fan fiction is written in a completely different way than any other book I'd ever read. And it was about 2 men falling in love. And I thought, this is perfect. I love this fit, because I'd gotten tired of bodice ripper romances. Mm-hmm. And so I wrote, fan fiction for Starsky and Hutch and almost for the professionals and for Star Trek, and made fan vids and did all this stuff. And the next logical step to me when I heard about people publishing male romances, and maybe they'd rewritten their slash and kind of revised it to fit a bigger audience. I thought, this is for me. So that's how I heard about it. And I think I'm not the only one who's made that transition. You kind of start with Kirk and Spock or Starsky and Hutch, and then you go forward from there.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of people that we interview start out writing fan fiction and then just stepped into making their own stories and building their own worlds and stuff like that. But slash fiction and fan fiction seems to be a lot of people's common ground, which is really cool.
Sorry, the coolest thing that I've noticed in the last year or two is that authors are finally admitting, oh, here, I have all this fan fiction. You can just go read it for free.
Yeah.
Whereas before, I think it was like a secret. Oh, I don't want them to know to tarnish what I'm trying to do. But readers are really open to it. They're like, oh, look, all these free things to read by an author that I really love.
Yeah.
Have you noticed that as well?
I have, and it's really cool too, because a lot of the times they're writing in a pairing or a ship or a fanfic or whatever that I love. Like, I think Ellie Witt submitted a bunch of Good Omens fan fiction and like slash and stuff, which is like, besides Stucky, which I know we both share a very mutual love for, I love Good Omens slash. Like, that is some of my absolute favorite.
Oh yeah, my niece is really into it. I could see why they're a fun pairing for sure, because they're so dynamic together, which is kind of the cornerstone of any good story, right? It's if the characters can mesh together and be separate and create something between them, that's wonderful to watch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. They're very cute together. And like I just mentioned, the Stucky thing, like, we're both huge fans of that, and you post Stucky pictures all the time and like fan art of Stucky stuff, and I live for it. I love it.
Well, Jacqueline Osborne was posting Yuri on Ice, and I thought, well, shoot, if she can do that, let me bring forward my favorite fandom du jour, right? Because you go through phases, and everybody seems to love it. I love the Yuri pics, and people love the Stucky, and other people are doing different things like that. It doesn't have to be, all character based or all the books that I'm writing.
Right.
This is something I love that I want to share. And they're so cute because Bucky needs Steve and Steve needs Bucky.
Yes.
And that's it.
Yes, they
need each other.
Exactly. It's like, it's so funny. And I'm hogging our time, but I'm going to tell a story anyway. My husband didn't know that Stucky was one of my favorite ships ever. And I've been really secretive because like, that's kind of one of our first dates that we ever went on was at the comic book store. And he told me like Captain America before all the movies came out and stuff. And I actually have a Captain America shield tattoo on my arm that I got for him when he deployed. So he's like super Captain America fan. And when I found Stucky, I did not bring it up to him because I know he'd throw like a huge fit. So I like had changed my background to a Stucky, like a really low key one, like a real whatever one. And he saw it and was like, "What's that?" And I was like, "Oh no." I finally had to confess, and he's like, "No, what are you talking about?" I'm like, "They're meant to be. They're in love."
They're in love. They risked everything for each other. They came through time so they could be together.
Exactly.
Right? Both of them are time travelers of a sort. Except Bucky, I think, suffered. I don't know who suffered more, right? They both suffered in different ways. Bucky suffered physically, right? Horrible thing. Read some of those fan fictions. It's just like, how did he live? And Steve suffered emotionally, which for him is, they each suffered in the worst way they possibly could.
I feel like me and you could have an entire episode where we like deep dive like Stucky fan fiction, but for the sake of keeping this on track, I guess we'll move on before we just super derail.
Super derail.
All right. So, of course, the next logical question is why time travel romance?
Well, I've always been big into time travel stories. One of the first ones I read was called The Green Bronze Mirror, and the author was like 14 years old, and she had a portrait on the back, and the girl looks into a bronze mirror, and she goes back into Roman times in England. And I was like, oh, this is fascinating, because you get this fish out of water trope, which is, how I officially announce, oh, why do you like time travel? Fish out of water, yay. But what I really like is just watching someone learn to survive, which is fish out of water, but it's deeper than that for me. It's how do they learn the culture and the language and everything that they have to do to survive? You can't just go down to the store and get a Slurpee from 7-Eleven. You really have to figure things out. So I really enjoyed that. And when I was a girl, I was always reading The Ruby Ring and stuff like this. And so when I came forward to now, and I'm like, well, I really want to write historicals. And though I wrote a historical series, Oliver and Jack, under a different pen name, it wasn't like the most popular thing. I also didn't market it. But the realization hit me that historical is a very steady market. lots of good readers, but it's never like going to take off. It's never going to be something I could support myself. So I thought, okay, what can I do that's kind of a cross between the two of those? So it's got to be romance, male romance. And then I kind of did a little research in the background. I thought, well, there's a blank hole. There's not a lot of time travel romances in the male genre. And there's a few, but I thought, okay, this is something I could do and throw a little history in there because they're really, I'm going to admit it, historicals that are marketed as time travel. They're just historicals. It's my way of getting the cute modern guy back into the past so I can write a historical novel. I'm just going to admit it right to you and everybody listening. That's the truth. I'm sorry. I lied to everyone.
Hey, it works. It works though, because it's, within this genre, there's no point in reinventing the wheel for romance, but like finding that cool niche genre that nobody's really tapped into. Mm-hmm. Like I wouldn't have never thought of time travel. And that's just, it's fun. It's good. And it rides that, like you said, that comfortable line between definitely being paranormal because it's time travel, but not so crazy that it's like, vampires or shifters where there's definitely an audience for that. And they're usually not the same as the contemporary. So it's the very nice Venn diagram,
like a small corner of it. Well, and the one thing that I made a little note about was readers have brought it up to me that they say, oh, I don't even care that I don't know how the time travel works. And I think that's one thing that separates me from like the science fiction time travels where they're very technical. Like there's a committee of people going back to save artifacts or to rescue people or to get in a machine and to make changes. And to me, it wasn't, that wasn't as important as what happens to you when you go through time.
Right. Yeah. That's something that I when I was talking to your book in a Discord group that I'm a part of, they were asking about the time travel. And I was like, it's never explained. And I'm super cool with that because it's a romance novel. If I was reading a hardcore science fiction book, I would expect them to explain to me how these people were transporting hundreds of years between where they're at. But it's romance. So honestly, if he could have walked through a mirror and I've been like, that's fine. Like it's fine. It totally works.
To the mirror. Yeah. And different things create the time travel aspect of it. I think that was one of the questions that you asked. Is the time travel in your stories connected?
Yeah, that was the one I was about to ask you.
Oh, okay, good. So the one thing when I started writing Heroes for Ghosts, there was like a low pressure system and that kind of created an atmosphere whereby the guy who is on the battlefield, that Stanley, can go forward in time. And I didn't really explain it to myself. I have a thing, if I could go back and live my life over, I'd be a meteorologist. Not the person giving the report, but the person reading the isobars and the pressure systems and measuring dew points and all that stuff. Always fascinated me. So anyway, woulda, coulda. So all my books have weather in them. And as I'm writing the second book, which is Honey from the Lion, there's a big blizzard that Lori wakes up in, because it's October and blizzards happen. And I realized at that point that I kind of had set this weather idea, that weather is part of what allows this time transfer to happen. So book 2 has a blizzard, book 3 has a rainstorm, book 4 has, I think it's windstorms and dust devils in the desert. And I think book 5, which I'm still writing, has a contrast between rainy, gloomy weather and bright, sunshiny blue. So it's like the quick switch between weather systems. So I guess weather is part of what will get people going through time.
And you said that wasn't intentional. It was one of those like organic things that just kind of happened as you were writing?
Yeah, I would say it was organic because I just started out. I was like, well, I don't even know how it happens. But as I looked back, I was like, oh, this is weather. The guy even goes, Devon is the modern character. He even goes to become a meteorologist when he gets back to the States. Yeah, so I was like, let's just go with it, because to me, weather is fascinating. So that's really
cool. And I never had placed the weather being the thing until, we had talked about it prior to this, like, because I had read Heroes for Ghosts and like it makes sense, like reflecting back on it now, having read the first 2 in the series, like, yeah, I mean, it all is triggered by like crazy weather and that's just really cool.
Right. The other thing in Honey from the Lion, what I did was I wanted to have, I don't know why I came up with this. I wanted to have something about an Iron Mountain. So I literally Googled Iron Mountain. So I got the paper recycling company and I got the technology storage company. And then I got this place in southern Wyoming, just outside the town of Farthing, called Iron Mountain. And of course, it's not made of iron, but it kind of looks like iron because there's different rocks that are rusting and stuff. So part of that one was also involves a meteor shower. which I thought was kind of cool. That the meteor shower coinciding with this blizzard, and of course you're going to go through time. Just so be careful when you go up there.
In Honey from the Lion, it's set in the 1890s. Was there a certain draw to why you wanted to write in that time period?
Well, my great love is historical fiction and historical romance, and I had written my Oliver and Jack series in 1846 in London, so I'm well steeped in that, that era. And then I'm a big fan of Little House on the Prairie, so I read, tons of stuff about that era, and that's the 1860s, the 1880s. And then I wanted it to be before technology kind of came into play. I'd already picked my location of Farthing, Wyoming. The train station was supposed to be built in the early 1900s. Well, I wanted it to be before that. I didn't want any trains. I didn't want any technology. I wanted the characters to be isolated. And I wanted it to be after the Battle of Wounded Knee, which happened in 1890. So that we'll just go the next year. And from there developed the character of John being somebody who had fought in the Indian Wars and was desperate to get away from all the horror and the damage and the bad things that had gone on with that. And I was like, oh, it's the perfect fit. And then lo and behold, in 1892, Tom Ketchum, who's the bad guy in Wild as the West Texas Wind, actually went on to rob a train in Denning, I think it's Denning, New Mexico. I thought, oh, that'll be the perfect place to put Zach. So everything just sort of fit together once I picked a spot and made my parameters no technology after this battle. And so thus those books, and this one in particular, is set in that time.
So this is a good follow-up question to that. How much research do you have to put into your books? I mean, it sounds like you really deep dive. I mean, you said history was your passion, so this probably isn't a chore for you. It's more just like, yay, research.
Well, I do. I get the books, thank God for the internet, because the only thing stopping me is the rule. I can't stop in the middle of a story to research every 5 lines. I have to write it down. But you can look things up right away. I don't know what we did, before the internet came along, because I can find all kinds of information. Of course, I order way too many books on this subject about bad guys and Western motifs. And, I do a ton of research. The things I had to research for Honey from the Lion was, there's a huge list, topography, the weather patterns, what was the meteor shower called? It's the Orionids. The rivers, what does Iron Mountain really look like? When did buffalo wolves go extinct? What happened at the Battle of Wounded Knee? How much do buffalo robes weigh? Native American beadwork, on and on and on it goes. And to me, it's fun. So I'm already steeped in the Old West, I would say. So just really pinpointing, what I needed to know for this story. And the struggle is what to leave in and what to leave out. You can't throw it in there because then it becomes a history school book rather than a story with good details. For example, like the current story I'm writing right now, Hemingway's Notebook, is set in 1932. And I realized I was just out of my depth, which is why it takes me so long to write this particular story. Because I knew some things, surface things, but like if I want my characters to go to the movies in Coda, Wyoming in 1932, is there a movie theater and what is it called? So that slowed me down. So I don't think I'll write in 1932 again unless I do a lot of reading. Because I already know the century. I know the 1800s. I just, for some reason, that's what I'm fascinated with, how people lived and how they moved across the country. And yeah, tons of fun for me. Maybe.
I was going to say, I really enjoyed how much time and effort you put into the research. And I'm glad that it's, I could tell that it was something that you were passionate about in a good way, because the way that you wove it through the story made it interesting. Because I don't know how people in the 1890s got along, right? Like, I don't know what the everyday kind of stuff was. And the way that you folded the chores into the storytelling. And, like I think you had mentioned that you basically were able to show how the life was because John was teaching Lori how to live.
Right. And it gave me the perfect excuse to do all those chores. For any other story, you kind of gloss over it. Oh, he hauled the coal or whatever. In 1932, there's no coal furnaces. But it was like the perfect excuse for me to do that, because in my mind, you can write a sexy hot times romance and that's fine. But what are they doing when they're not in bed together? What are they doing to create a connection between them as they live their day-to-day lives? And that's what fascinates me. If you can't live with somebody who leaves the jar off the peanut butter lid, how are you going to manage with everything else? There's some basic things going on there. So also I'll admit that I'm a big fan of Little House on the Prairie, and I don't know. I just soak it up when Laura's like, and then I milked the cow, and then I hauled the water, and I'm like, give it to me, give it to me. It's like crack cocaine, and I don't know why. People have bad childhoods. Everyone did in their own way, but mine was sort of unsettled. So when I read Little House on the Prairie or a book like that, it's very structured. Everything's very simple, and I love that. I just love it.
Well, I can definitely tell that you put that little bit of you into John, because John was very much like he felt peace in the routine, like the stuff that they do every day, and like he had a very strict bedtime. Like it really fit his character very well.
Oh yeah, I'm pretty. Now that you mentioned, I'm like, yeah, that's definitely me. Oh, it's 9:30.
Time for bed.
Time for bed.
Like if you don't have a pocket watch, I feel like you need one.
I do. I think I do. I do have a compass, but I don't have a pocket watch.
I think you do. I think you need to get a pocket watch just so you can pull it out of your pocket and be like, all right, it's time for bed or whatever.
Too funny.
Oh, man. Was John based on anyone you found from research or any type of historical figure?
John was based on kind of a collection of ideas that I had in my head. First of all, I have a thing for Pa Ingalls, which is Laura's father, Charles Ingalls, because he was the one that set up her world to be, him and Ma together. Things happen in a certain way, in a certain order, and very structured and very stable. I think if Pa had not married Caroline, he would have gone all the way to the West Coast, fancy for he would have been a different person. But I have a thing for Pa. I wish he was my Pa. He's in there. He's inside John. And then there's John Winchester, who is the father on Supernatural now. He wasn't a great dad, but the actor who plays him is just super sexy to me. So imagine Pa in that body, and you've got John. I think that's where he came from. So he's no historical figure. He's just a big giant fantasy in my head. I would live with John Henton. I definitely would, because it would just be so safe.
For sure.
One
of my absolute favorite scenes, I think, in the story isn't even one of the like actual sexy time scenes. It's the scene where he's like teaching Lori how to shave, because it's such a because it was such a extremely intimate moment between them, where he's just showing him a really basic everyday thing that men had to do back then. It was the first time that they were real close, and like he had to shave his, like the whole thing, like you built it up very well. And that was such a very basic chore. That was just a very like structured thing for John, like how he talked through the swipes and like make sure you do it at this angle and everything. Like I love that scene. That's one of my absolute favorites.
Oh, that's nice to hear. Well, it might not surprise you to know that scene is on par with me for him showing him how to build a fire in the stove. To me, that's all the same. It resonates at the same level for me. I can see how when you describe it the way you do that, it's maybe a little more erotic from the outside, but for me on the inside, all of those chores, it's vibrating inside of me, even as I think about it, because it's so intimate. They're alone together in the wilderness. Right. It's cabin fic, right? The old fan fiction idea, trapped together, and there's only one bed. I was like, I have a little drawing of the cabin layout and how narrow the walls are and how big the bed is. I had such a good time figuring that out, and it kind of juts out from the rest of the cabin, so it's super cold. And to me, one of the best moments is when John gets up and says, "Scoot over, I'll sleep on the cold side." And we'll patch the hole in the morning, and all of those kinds of things right up there with the shaving scene to me, because that's just the kind of story I wanted to write. This is the book of my heart. I'll admit it, passion project for sure. I wanted to write something that was Outlander meets Little House on the Prairie meets Brokeback Mountain without the sad ending.
I could go on for days about how much I hate the ending of Brokeback Mountain, but yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah.
It's meaningful and significant, but it's like too sad. Why did we have to do that? Why do we always have to kill off those characters?
Speaking of sad endings, I'm sure me and Jess are going to talk about this before the interview, but she's not here, so I've got to bring this up. We both hit about 57% through the book at different times and thought that it was going to be a super sad ending to a book. Like I was like, there's no way this is sad. Like this can't be a sad book. But I got to about 57% and I texted her and was like, please tell me this book doesn't end sad, because it was right. I think and there's going to be spoilers. If you're somehow made it through this far into the interview without knowing, there's going to be spoilers. There's, I think at about 57-ish% through the book is, I think right after they had that really big blowout, like when they had that fight where Lori got like beat up and they had like kind of fallen apart and come back together. So it was like,
Yeah.
Like they had mended, and like John finally admitted that he, it scared him how much he loved Lori and like all this stuff. And I was like, I love this. And then, of course, I was like, oh my God, I remember the story about the little fox and he's supposed to freeze to death soon. Like, and I know Lori's going to get ripped back to the future. Like, I was losing my mind. So poor Jess had to be like, you're fine. It's fine.
Just keep reading. Oh, that's amazing to hear. That it's at the fight scene when you're realizing that, something else bad is going to happen because nothing has. And that's not the way these stories go. I can feel it. That's a wonderful effect I've had on a reader.
Yeah,
Thank
for
you.
sure. I really loved it. And
Yeah.
it's like, since we read on this podcast, we read romances. Romances have happy endings. Like they're supposed to have happy endings. So, but every once in a while, we'll get, led down a dark alley. Like with TJ Klune has knocked the wind out of my sails a couple times. So I'm like, I'm prepared to accidentally get my heart stepped on. So I thought that's what was about to happen with this.
Oh, you were very brave to keep going. And I'm glad you had a friend you could text to say, no, it's fine.
Yeah, well,
fine.
If she hadn't finished it, I was going to like message you on Facebook and be like, Jackie, I need you to tell me if this book's going to be okay.
True. Well, and that's kind of like, it's a little like bottled lightning because I meant it to be poignant, and I wanted people to have empathy for the characters, but you can't really set up something like that easily, and I keep looking for ways to make it meaningful. It's not going to be like this, but it should be something that readers really are invested in. And that's my goal. So I'm glad this story had that effect. It was, because I knew it would be sad. I'm like, yeah, we'll yank them apart. Let's do it.
Yeah, well, and the ending too was surprising because I really thought that somehow John was going to make his way back to Lori's time, since like John's alone and like it would make the most sense for him to leave his life behind because he doesn't have any ties. But the fact that Lori had to choose, like, no, you know what? I know this sucks for my friends, but they'll heal. I have to be with John. Like, I don't care. You know what I mean? So he gave up his life to be with John. Like, it was really bittersweet and I really liked it.
Right. And a couple of readers have asked me, why didn't Lori tell John the truth? And they think that's kind of bad because they're lovers and they're very close. And why wouldn't he tell them? And so I posited the question to them, how would you tell John Hinton that you are a time traveler? And they're like, they kind of stirred and wiggled in their chairs and they realized that John was not a person you could very easily, reveal this to. Whereas, Lori's friends eventually come back in time in the next two books. And I thought about that long and hard. I thought, okay, Zach and Leighton, I'm like, Leighton wouldn't care if Zach was from or wherever. So it didn't even matter. He didn't have to tell him. Zach has no interest in going back. He just sort of fits into the Wild West. And then Maxton is like, Trent kind of finds out and Maxton explains it. And it's hard for Trent, but he does get it. And I thought, well, that's kind of an important thing for readers, that people who are in love and in a relationship are honest with each other. I'm like, okay, I'm figuring out ways. How do you tell someone you're a time traveler? It's almost impossible.
Well, especially for John. Like, John's just going to pat him on the head and be like, sure. Yeah, like he's never going to believe. He can't fathom that. That's so beyond John, So No.
He would say, what in tarnation are you trying to say now?
I have been purposely using the word tarnation all week, and it's just my favorite thing.
That's great. And heckfire. That's the other one. What in heckfire are you going on about, Little Red?
Love it.
Yeah, me too.
Can you tell us where the title of the book came from?
Oh, sure. I had been reading an article about a poet named Leah Bodine Drake. And she had published a poem called Honey from the Lion in the Saturday Review in December 1947. Now, there's no way I read the original poem, but it was talking about the concept that actually comes from the Bible. It's a rephrasing of a Judges 14:9. And of course, it's a metaphor for taking something sweet from something wild or something hard. So I didn't know it was a biblical phrase. When I wrote it down, I wrote her name and Honey from the Lion. I tucked it away. And this was maybe 17 years ago. And when I moved into my house, I found this piece of paper. I stuck it on my fridge 15 years ago because I knew that it was a story that needed telling. Now, come to find out, there's a lot of books based on the Christian Bible or Christianity that are called Honey from the Lion because it's a very important concept in Christianity. So when you search for my book or search for their book, you're going to get my book, and bless them. I hope they enjoy it when they get
Hey, man, maybe you accidentally opened some doors for people they didn't know needed open. So there you go.
Nobody's complained, so I guess it's okay. And then I wanted to mention on the thing about time travel, I have this reader named Randall, and he said to me, he wrote to me, well, Jackie, now that John hasn't died at the end of the story, what happens to the ghost story at the beginning of the story where they tell the story of old Joe and his little red fox? Now, when I was writing this ghost story at the beginning, I only put it in because I knew that if you go to a dude ranch, you're going to sit around a fire on bales of hay and you're going to get a ghost story or two told to you. So I would walk around the house going, old Joe and his little red fox, over and over again. So I thought, that's a great story. And I thought, well, wait a minute. I had someone very wise, her name was Nick, tell me that if you do something like, if you write a scene like that, there's meaning in that scene that you could draw from. You're not just writing it because you're doing an exercise. Your subconscious knows what it's doing. So I went back and looked at that story and I thought, well, I bet you this is about John, except they changed his name because old Joe sounds a lot better around a campfire than John Henton. And then he said to me, well, if John doesn't die, then what happens to the story of old Joe and his little red fox? And I said, oh, criminy, tarnation. The hair on the back of my neck stood up and I realized that I had a paradox. So if you go to Farthingdale Dude Ranch now, you're not going to hear that story. You're going to hear a different one. But what if you are on an alternate timeline and you went when you were a kid and you come back and you ask what happened to the story of old Joe? They're not going to know because your timeline is now different than the one they're on. I mean, you're intersecting at this point. So it's like a time paradox in a weird way. So that gave me the idea for my next project, which I know is one of your questions, to write a series of cowboy stories set at the Farthingdale Ranch because, again, there's a historical aspect. People expect things to be rustic at a dude ranch for the most part. You draw water and you clean stables and you ride a horse and you have to take care of the horse and you have to build a fire to have the campfire. And so there was still that element of rustic old-fashionedness, and I could have cowboys and ranch hands and blacksmiths all falling in love. And what could be more fun than that? So the next series is the Farthingdale Ranch series, because I took a vote in my group and they said, no, putting the word dude makes it sound silly. And maybe not all these guys are dudes. Some of them are cowboys. I'm going to have some ex-cons and parolees go to the ranch, like those, they have these places where they put ex-convicts with Mustangs and they kind of tame each other. And I thought, okay, I could do something like that. And my mind just went nuts. And so I have a bunch of sticky notes on my wall.
That's amazing.
And I will ask my group if I can write them out of order because, some of them demand, as you know, to be written before other ones do.
That's excellent. That's fun. Yeah. That's going to be really fun to read. I'm looking forward to that. That's awesome.
And I'm looking forward to writing them because I love time travel, and I'm not tapped out, but I'm like, okay, I think readers might be. A 6-book series is long enough, right, for a bunch of books, and then I'll write 6 cowboy ones, and then after that is finally when I'm going to write my Boys of Harlan series. So Laurie Quinn, who is the guy who disappears in Honey from the Lion, lives in Harlan, right? He works in Denver and he lives in Harlan, and he's kind of like this central character. So the people at the ranch know about Laurie, the guy who disappeared that one time, and he came back and they disappeared again. In Harlan, he's actually a cold case for the cops. The FBI thinks he might have been kidnapped, and then he has 2 friends that also disappeared, and then there's this other guy. Everybody lives or has connection with Harlan, so there's like 6 missing people in these cold case files at the police station. So I thought, well, wouldn't that be fun? And then it kind of took a different turn. So only 3 of the books will be like cop related, and the other 3 will be motorcycle gang related. So we'll see what happens with that one. But the connecting factor between all 3 series is Laurie Quinn, and he didn't know it, and I didn't know it when I came up with him. So that just goes to show you the subconscious works in the
sure. Are those also going to be time travel, you think?
I don't think so. The cowboy one will have, heavy on the history and the chores because I'm devoted. And then the Boys of Harlan will be completely contemporary with, Laurie Quinn's case coming up. Well, where the heck did he go? There's no trace of him anywhere. But what about this, Wells Fargo account we found? They find things, but they can't find him and they just don't know.
That's cool.
So that'll be the connection. Yeah, I think that'll be fun to work
that
with.
is really cool. And like I dig that it's all tied together. Like it's all the same universe, but totally different, subgenres. That's really cool.
And it didn't occur to me at first, but I thought, ooh, wouldn't that be cool if, and I thought, well, you should just write a whole series. And I think some readers have told me, oh, I saw, because he's mentioned in my Hot Chocolate Kisses story. The guy in that story used to work with Lori. He's like, yeah, he disappeared from work one day. And I had readers going, he's in there. I see him. And readers love that. I know I love it when I read a book. So there you go.
That's awesome. I dig that a lot. That's brilliant. Well, we'll definitely have to make sure to watch closely for that. If people want to keep up with your work or find you on the World Wide Web, where can they find you?
They can find me at www.jackienorth.com.
Okay.
And then and that's got links to all my social media. I'm on Instagram and Twitter and the Facebooks, and I have a Pinterest account where I collect my delicious images, because those are so fun. You know how you can get sucked into Pinterest. That's where all my stuff is stored and all that. So yeah, go to jackienorth.com and there's a contact, and it's got all my social media on there.
Perfect. And we'll make sure to link that in the show notes as well, so you guys can jump in there and find her website, and I'll link everything in there to make it easy peasy. So thank you so much for joining us, Jackie. I really appreciated you taking the time. So fun fact, everyone, this is actually our second go. Our first interview got eaten by some technical difficulties, so this was fun.
Always the way. No, I was happy to come back because I felt like it was a practice, and this one went more smoothly because I knew kind of what the questions were and how I was going to really answer them rather than the notes that I had written for myself. So it was useful. So no worries.
Fantastic. Well, once again, thank you, and we'll catch you on the flip side.
All right. Thank you so much. You guys have a good night.
You too. Thank you again, Jackie, for taking the time to chat with us. And like I had mentioned at the last bit of the interview, that was take 2. So she was amazing enough to come back on and chat with us again after we had technical difficulties that ate it. So Jackie wins the Golden Award for most patient and wonderful person ever.
Yes. So that's it for January. We'll be back again next week with our February top episode, which will be an extra special episode. So make sure you check into that. But until then.
See you then.
Bye. Top to Bottom Podcast is part of the Frolic Podcast Network. Find more podcasts you'll love at frolic.media/podcasts.